Climate Change Minister Stephen Guilbeault appeared before the Environment and Sustainability Committee, and the far left quickly tore themselves to shreds. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Climate Change Minister Stephen Guilbeault arrived at the Environment and Sustainability Committee, and they had been looking to talk to him for quite some time. Because with Randy Boissonnault bowing out on Jasper and Stephen Guilbeault having been the overall arching minister who was in charge of it, there was questions about that. There was questions about the overall sustainability. There was questions about the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And the meeting went on. The meeting went on a couple hours. He was there. There was one 10-minute break, and it basically was World War III. There was just constant bickering and objections and points of order, and it was really funny. However, near the end, so the first hour they talked about all of that stuff I just listed, and then the second hour they were talking about biodiversity on this proposal from Stephen Guilbeault on what's called C73, where he wants to make Canada, transparent in what it's doing to save the environment, despite all of the environmental problems that we know are going on in most of the world. The NDP, I think, switched out and they put a new, one of their new members on the thing. I believe up to now it had always been MP Green, and now it's MP Collins, who's out of Vancouver, or at least out of British Columbia. I don't know her riding that specifically, but I'm fairly certain she's a BC NDP. Now, they want to talk about this Bill C73 in the second hour. She gets her turn to talk about Bill C73, which they're doing a study on to see if it's a good idea and all that kind of thing that they have to do. It's at that phase of the bill. But I'm telling you. Now, remember, when you see these clips, and it's probably a 15-minute exchange. I'm got it down probably about 12. There wasn't much you could remove, and get your popcorn because you're going to love every second of it. However, at this point, they had been clawing at each other for hours, for an hour and a half or whatever it is. Stephen Guilbeault the whole far left in general doesn't like it when you question them. So at this point, the Conservatives are just sitting in the corner laughing as the far left just snaps and snarls at each other. And it comes to head in this particular exchange. The patience is thrown out. All the gloves are off. The veneer of "look at how aren't we all so polite" is gone, is long gone. It's very entertaining. This is how it began.
But Minister, maybe you can explain it to me, because you did approve the project, and when you approved it, you said it wouldn't cause significant adverse environmental effects and actually referenced net zero emissions by 2050. So on the one hand, you're saying the provinces get to decide, but yet you yourself approved Bain de Nord. And I want to give you the opportunity, because you didn't get a chance to answer my other question, is
point of order, Mr. Chair.
you...
And now are you keeping the time? I pressed the wrong button. Okay.
My intention is not to disrupt. I'm just curious if Bain de Nord has anything to do with biodiversity. I've worked pretty hard to get biodiversity on the agenda here.
I think it's a relevant question. I find it quite interesting myself, is how this law will interact with provincial jurisdiction and rights over resource development. I think it's relevant.
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have? What are you starting him yet?
5.5 minutes. Yeah. 5.5 minutes. Go ahead.
Given the interruption, would you mind if I started from the top?
No, you got 5.5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Minister, maybe you can explain how it is you're right now saying you have to throw up your hands and those decisions are only made by the province, when you yourself approved Bain de Nord. You made the decision, you referenced emissions reduction when you were talking about it, and your explanation, you referenced that it wouldn't cause significant environmental harm. And now you're saying to Madame Posey that you couldn't have done anything?
Ce que j'ai dit, en fait, what I said, and I'll say this in French to make sure I get it right, the use of natural resources in the Canadian Constitution is a provincial area of jurisdiction. The federal government...
Although...
J'y arrive.
I'm getting to that.
I'd like to hear the minister's answer because it's really important to
And I was just clarifying my question, so he understood the question itself.
It's very interesting, this exchange. So please go ahead, Mr. Minister.
Donc, le gouvernement fédéral...
So the federal government, when it comes to impact assessments, does have a role to play when it comes to some projects. But as you know, the Supreme Court called on us to redefine the role in terms of environmental impact of projects.
Votre question.
I'm trying to respond to your question. If you don't want me to answer your question, that's your prerogative. It's your time.
For me.
You see, at this point, everybody is just snapping his mouth. What I like is when she said, "Do you want to start from the top?" And you could hear the conservatives egging them on. No, you go ahead. Don't, because they like. I'll put the clip to the whole meeting, and there was so much in it. I'll probably have to do another video on it, but. They were just sitting there watching these two groups tear each other to shreds. And of course, Stephen Guilbeault tap dancing along this idea that on the one hand, he's this great environmental champion, but on the other hand, he signs all of this legislation and does absolutely nothing to protect the environment. And MP Collins was coming right at him. So he was jumping all over. He's all mad. And I just, that's just the beginning of the sparks that are starting to fly. You've already heard one Liberal MP try to stick his nose into the conversation to defend or protect or distract or take the clock away from Stephen Guilbeault or anyone talking to him. And I just love how all of a sudden Stephen Guilbeault's a professional victim, right? Because we remember that the Alberta government took them to court and got their overreach destroyed. And that's what the Conservatives are talking about, how they're making this bill, which is just more overreach, and it's going to conflict with the Canadian Constitution and the provincial rights over all of the biodiversity that is in their region. And why are we wasting our time with this? So, however, MP Collins, she is trying to talk to him about things that he avoided answering in other rounds. And they are all going to start to really tear each other to shreds now. This next clip is... it's a pretty good example of what I mean, of the, I'm telling you, it's great.
Go back to the question that you weren't able to answer, that I asked you around, do you regret approving or being part of a government that approved the Trans Mountain Pipeline, that bought the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
On parlait de Baie du Nord, on parle du...
We were talking about Baie du Nord, pipelines. Mr. Chair, I'm a tad lost here.
I think we're getting off topic. I think that Baie du Nord is very relevant to the discussion of C-73, but I don't think personally that the Trans Mountain is.
So climate change and weak environmental policies have driven a biodiversity crisis. I hope that the minister would agree that that is threatening essential ecosystems, that your own words, the atmosphere and our climate certainly don't need them when talking about pipelines. Many of us believe we cannot build pipelines and meet our international climate commitments at the same time.
We're back on pipelines, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yeah. If you could veer back to biodiversity, Ms. Collins.
So I'm not sure if you want me to read my same question again that started off with climate change and weak environmental policies drive the biodiversity crisis.
Monsieur l'appel au règlement.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairperson. Listen, this legislation is going to... The legislation we're debating in committee is C-73. And there's going to, in all likelihood, be amendments to this bill. Can we please discuss the bill at hand?
Do you understand that the Liberals don't want to hear the minister's answer to this question?
I'm sorry, I understand you don't want this bill to pass.
Okay. Ms. Collins, why don't
Point
you
of order,
continue?
Mr. Chair.
Why don't you continue?
I would just like an apology and for the member to withdraw.
Well, I didn't even really hear what the member said.
She was imputing motives to my questions about...
This happens a lot in this committee.
and it is against the rules, and it is unparliamentary. And Mr. Chair, I've asked for the member to withdraw and apologize.
I didn't hear what the member said. I mean...
Oui, je vais le répéter. I said that she doesn't want to talk about the bill that we are supposed to talk about. It's C-73.
No, Madam Chatel.
Is it...
You said...
Is
Mark at the end of that. I see... Does she not want to talk about the bill? So you can answer that, Ms. Collins, and go on with your question.
It's home policing in the middle of all of it, right? Like, so never mind that we got one far left group tackling another far left group over a subject that they both claim is more important to them than just about anything, than Canadians having good places to live or affordable food. Then one starts to take the other to task. And what really bothers me about it, though, like all joking aside, is Stephen Guilbeault, right? Oh, what are we talking about? Like all of a sudden, right, Mr. Professional Victim, who stands up and says that all the time. I'm sure even if you only have a cursory understanding of the Canadian politics and the environmental question that we got going on, you would have heard Stephen Guilbeault saying that everything we do is affected to the climate. Everything that we touch goes to the climate. So why would he try to avoid answering the question about the Trans Mountain Pipeline or anything that's related to the environment? Because they are all, in his words, connected, right? So right there, that's a flag for me, right? That if you're telling me that all of a sudden you want to hide behind these little, you want to split hairs and you want to hide behind some sort of procedure, when any other time you'll stand up in the House of Commons and scream that even the guy wiping his nose is somehow affecting the butterflies that flap their wings in the nuclear power plants of China. Like, to tell me that it's all connected all the time, and then all of a sudden when you don't want to answer a question, you turtle up and you back off and you run and you hide behind the MPs that are sitting there. Because that would have been discussed in the morning's caucus meetings, right? The Liberals would have said, okay, who's all going there? This is the tactic that we're going to be using. You're going to say a lot of point of orders. You're going to disrupt the flow of the conversation. Now, MP Collins is not going to understand any of that because I'm fairly certain she's new to this committee. And she's sitting there talking to the other girl about how you're not allowed to impugn. And the poor chair is just like in his mind, he's thinking, I am not getting in the middle of this madness between these two women having a scrap. I'm tired and I want to go home. Like that's like, I don't know what he's saying. I don't want to impugn what he's thinking, but the way that he's being so nonchalant and just letting them sort of settle the differences themselves indicates to me that he's just trying to stay out of it. However, in true far left tone policing, Ms. MP Collins is not done with the question.
Mr. Chair, I have asked the chair, would you make a ruling on this? It is unparliamentary to impute motives to another member, and so I would appreciate a ruling, first of all. The member said that she doesn't want the bill to pass. This is a very important bill to me.
So, Madame Chastel, tell me that wasn't what you meant, that you don't think, you do believe we all, as members of the committee, want the bill to pass, and then we can move on.
I honestly wondered whether we could talk to this, and it begs the question if she doesn't want to.
This is actually a conditional, clearly not a withdrawal and apology.
This is not productive. Let's start over. Ms. Collins, why don't you ask you a question there from the top? Why don't you actually ask you a question from the top?
And so, just for clarity, Mr. Chair, are you ruling?
I'm ruling that we should stop. We should not impugn motives to others in this committee.
So, can I ask for an apology and a withdrawal, please? Then
you can ask for an apology, but I don't.
I'm actually asking through the chair. Can the chair ask for an apology and a withdrawal?
Madame Chastel, I'm sure you didn't mean it.
I apologize, I didn't mean it.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was excellent, because the Liberal member, of course, is used to being able to claw at the Conservatives that way because they will give it back just as good as they got it. But the NDP and MP Collins herself is always, it's not the first time I've seen her display an overt sensitivity to, language police. And the chair didn't want to get in the middle of it at all. You could see that man desperately trying to not desperately, but like expertly trying to smooth it over in a way that he could just extract himself from the conversation. Like if he was anything other than the chair, he would have turned and walked away, because he just doesn't. Why get drawn into the middle of it if you don't have to? And if you're watching this as a man, you understand exactly. Like, that reminded me of a guy who was trying to police an argument between his mother and his wife. It's just, gotta go, man. I'm out of here. Like, let me know how it works out. But he did what he had to do there. You could see when the smile dropped because she was like, well, I'm asking through the chair. So he put on his functionary hat. But you just know that later when nobody's listening, those guys are going to laugh their faces off. And who can blame them? These are supposed to be, people that are looking after serious subjects, and all they're worried about is a couple of words in a sentence. It's really very immature. It's an immature position. And if you want me to believe that everything that you care about is so important to you, then why do we just burn 3 minutes watching you and the other girl argue over semantics or over a couple of words in a sentence or over some punctuation? That's not what serious looks like. That's what juvenile looks like. That's what, hyperactive like drama teachers do, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that you see on Disney Channel or something. Like that's just not professional. You have to nobody cares about your feelings. Let's get to the point. We're here to discuss this bill. We're here to make sure that the Liberal government is called out for all of their environmental hypocrisy. To the credit, I think, of MP Collins, she doesn't back down. Many of the NDP will get a little bit of pressure from the Liberals and they'll tuck tail and run.
So let's keep going. Let's keep going. I did stop the clock, but let's keep going.
So, Minister, this is a very important bill to me. Biodiversity is incredibly important. Emissions reduction is incredibly important. And these things are connected. And I think you know that deep down. I think you know that when a government buys a pipeline that will expand the oil sands to ship...
Point of order, Chair. She's impugning some things on the minister. She's impugning that he's thinking something that he hasn't expressed.
Talk again. I must tell you, I intend to be done here at 6:30, so we may not get to a second round of questions at this rate. Ms. Collins, I think you had a good question there, and I think the answer would enlighten all of us. So can we just move on with the question?
I would like to ask the minister if he's ready to admit that buying the Trans Mountain Pipeline was a mistake.
Point of order.
Oh, come on.
What's the point of order?
Well, I understand Ms. Collins' point that
it's not relevant to the
and
discussion.
Biodiversity, but asking for an admission of guilt about something that was done or an admission of statement, I have no idea how this helps discuss Bill C-73.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, you allowed the Conservatives to ask about Jasper. You allowed Madame Posey to ask about Beta Nord. Please give me the same leeway that you have given to the other committee members.
Chair, it's not you stopping it.
This is very, very hard to sort out, I must admit.
Just let her finish the question.
Could we just ask the question and then...
I'm sure the minister's quite capable.
Minister I'm sure will have a good answer.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just the Liberal members seem to think that the minister needs protecting somehow.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. Okay.
No, you are not allowing him to answer the question.
Yes. Okay, we're going to stop.
Just ask for an apology and a withdrawal.
You know what?
I apologize and withdraw.
Yeah, that was great. There was so many things going on all at once in that conversation. The Conservatives in the corner egging them on. Oh no, it's the Liberals. Excuse me. The Conservatives in the corner going, egging them on. Oh no, it's the Liberals. We don't mind. She says point of order. The Conservatives are like, oh come on. One of the guys to my count, every Liberal at that table made a point of order in this one exchange. Stephen Guilbeault, a guy who's always got something to say, is sitting there quietly like he's got his thumb in the apple pie or whatever it is. All on top of all of this, MP Collins is demanding apology over more tone policing, right? Like, that's just amazing in my mind. And I find it, like, all joking aside, okay, because that just made me laugh. This whole thing got me, made me laugh, and I thought you would enjoy it. There's one more segment, but in the end, he had to call a break. He was like, that's it. You know what I mean? You guys are getting on my nerves. I mean, he didn't say it, but you could see in his mind, he's like, I'm throwing my hands up at the whole thing. I'm going to slam this gavel down, and then I can say whatever I want as not being the chair and straighten this mess out. I really believe that this is a good example of the reality of the far left. They're not after anything other than their own little motives, right? They all just want to make it seem like something rather than get to the bottom of things. They just want to tear each other to shreds. They just want to get juvenile, like, oh, the one guy, oh, she's impugning his motive because she had just said it about the other girl. I mean, do we really care that you're sitting in the playground, buddy, at, in your elementary school, that you haven't mentally matured beyond that point, despite all of the law school that you probably have, and the fact that you might, have, be of a certain age and have the ability to drive a car and all of that kind of things. And all you can do is just sort of tone police, right? Just jump all over the way that somebody says something, burning everybody's time and causing, terrible rifts in any personnel or any relationships that may be developing. While they're off camera, people must have hurt each other's feelings because MP Collins is just sitting there waiting for Stephen Guilbeault to answer the question. Now, this is some pretty good theater. I'm telling you. It's no wonder this country is a disaster.
I'm giving you the opportunity to answer the question.
When we reformed Impact Assessment Act in 2018, 2019, so before my arrival.
Sorry, did you hear the question about whether you regret?
I'm trying to get to your answer if you'll allow me.
Yeah.
Je vais y aller en français, je pense que c'est plus simple.
I'll speak in French. I think it's simpler. So when we overhauled the environmental impact legislation, one thing we wanted to do was depoliticize the assessment of projects in Canada. We were going to create an agency and give it the tools to do the job, and that agency assesses the projects, does the consultation. It worked for 4 years on projects, and I respect it to date as Minister of the Environment.
That you're answering the correct question, so that we're on the same page.
Exactement.
Are you answering it about Trans Mountain?
Ah non, excusez-moi, j'étais sur Baie du Nord.
Yeah.
I was talking about Baie du Nord. I wasn't there back then.
Right now.
J'ai été élu en 2000.
I was elected in 2019.
Government who is spending $35 billion on the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Do you think that was a mistake?
I think that I...
No, you have never answered.
I think that I answered your question several times. It's perhaps not the response you're wanting.
It's not going to answer the question.
That question has run its course, and so we'll go. Can we go on to the next question?
Clearly, the minister will not answer that question. So yeah.
I wanted to show you that last part so that I could establish two things, that I don't think this MP Collins is much of a pushover, though I do not think that she focuses her energies correctly. And of course, Stephen Guilbeault, what I can't stand about the Liberal Party is they say, oh, I already answered that question. Like all of a sudden it's beyond them or above them to repeat themselves. The Liberal Party, who says the same 5 sentences over and over again for a month at a time. I mean, all they ever do is repeat themselves. So if you're going to take the energy, the 30 seconds to say, I've already answered that question, why won't you just re-answer the question? Why don't you take the 30 seconds and prove to us that you've answered the question? Because I was watching it. I didn't hear him answer the question. And I watched the entire committee. I never heard him answer the question. Even when the Bloc come at him, I didn't hear anybody answer. I didn't hear him. Of course, they're the Liberal Party. They never answer a straight question unless they know for a fact they got the proof there on the paper in front of them. It's always about dodging and weaving, and you can see it. This minister who believes in so much, who thinks that we should all follow his lead, that all of these things that they always try to put forward, and yet he can't answer a straight question. So if you're sitting there and you're a neutral third party and you just show up and you don't know anything about anything in this argument, would you believe that this guy knows what he's doing by his inability to answer a question, by his refusal to answer a question? Or would you think, okay, this guy must, because of his job, I should just follow what he has to say? Of course, that never occurs to the far left. It doesn't occur to them that you would question no matter what their position is. The position is the last thing on the list that we care about. If your words make sense, then that's one thing. If they make no sense, then that's a very big thing. So it's telling her that you already answered the question, taking 60 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it was to say, to say that 3 times, you could have just answered the question quickly. It was, do you regret buying the pipeline or not? I mean, how hard could that be to say yes or no? Of course, it's very hard for the Liberal Party, because if he says no, then on the one hand, it blows up across the social media. And if he says yes, on the other hand, it blows up across the social media. And he can't answer at all because, truth be told, the Liberal government's environmental policies. We're 62nd out of 66 countries in the world. They're horrible. Even the United States, which has no environmental policies, is 7 or 8 places ahead of us. One of the things we can take away from this is how the NDP and the Liberals are very fragile when it comes to what things are said, which of course allows them to derail the conversation and of course makes it for Canadians to not get anything done. We can't have that kind of fragility in our leader. We can't have that kind of, I mean, imagine in your mind that one of these people became an ambassador to somewhere and they were in a country and they said, one of the leaders said something to them that wasn't, that they didn't think of, which would be everything, right? The fragility would be off the chart. So I think that if they want to get anywhere, of course, they probably don't now that I've said it out loud. They should worry less about what's being said or how something is being said, and they should worry more about what's getting done. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.